Ethan Evans gripped the handlebars of his son's second-hand bicycle, trying to ignore the duct tape holding the left grip in place as sweat dripped down his forehead in the sweltering summer heat. "Just a little more practice, buddy," he encouraged 7-year-old Lucas, whose knees were already decorated with fresh scrapes from his third fall of the afternoon. "You've almost got it." "I can't do it, Dad." Lucas protested, his lower lip trembling slightly as he glared at the bike like it was his worst enemy. "I'm never gonna learn." Ethan knelt down on the cracked pavement of Pinewood Park's empty basketball court, meeting his son's eyes. "Hey, that's not how Evans men talk, is it?" "What did I tell you about tough stuff?" Lucas sighed dramatically, reciting words he'd heard countless times. "We don't give up just because it's hard." "Exactly." Ethan ruffled his son's sandy blonde hair so much like his own, though Lucas had his mother's eyes. Those same eyes that had looked at Ethan with such disappointment before she'd walked out 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their 4-year-old alone. "One more try, then ice cream." "Deal?" Lucas perked up instantly, "with sprinkles. Is there any other way?" Ethan grinned, though mentally he recalculated the week's tight budget. An extra $1 for sprinkles meant one less coffee for himself tomorrow morning, but seeing his son's smile was worth it. Across the park, Fiona Ellison watched the scene unfold from a bench where her own son, Oliver, was engrossed in a handheld video game. At 9, Oliver had already mastered several coding languages but couldn't or wouldn't ride a bicycle. Fiona had tried hiring instructors, but her son had stubbornly refused each one. "Mom, I'm bored," Oliver complained without looking up from his screen. "Can we go home now? The driver's probably tired of waiting." Fiona tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "It's a beautiful day, Ollie. Maybe if you put down the game for 5 minutes, you'd notice." "There's nothing to do here," he muttered, as if on cue, a triumphant shout echoed across the court. Fiona looked up to see the man running alongside the small boy on the bicycle, gradually letting go as the child pedaled several feet unassisted before wobbling to a stop. "You did it, Lucas," the man exclaimed, his face lit with genuine pride as he swept the boy into a hug. "I knew you could." Something about the scene made Fiona's chest tighten. When was the last time she'd seen Oliver that excited about anything that didn't involve pixels? Since the divorce last year, he'd retreated further into his digital world, and her attempts to draw him out usually ended in standoffs or tears. "Oliver," she said suddenly, "what if you learned to ride a bike?" Her son didn't bother looking up. "Why would I need to? We have drivers," Fiona sighed. The chauffeurs, the private jets, the summer homes, these were the trappings of success she'd worked so hard for. As CEO of Ellison Tech, she'd built her father's modest software company into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. But lately, she'd begun to wonder what it was all worth if her son grew up unable to experience simple joys. The man and boy were now walking toward an old pickup truck parked nearby, the child licking an ice cream cone while animatedly describing his success. The father listened intently, his hand resting protectively on his son's shoulder. "Oliver, I'll be right back," Fiona said, standing up. "Stay where I can see you." She approached them just as the man was lifting the bicycle into the truck bed. "Excuse me," she called. He turned, and for a moment, Fiona lost her train of thought. He was handsome in an unpolished way, tall with broad shoulders, sandy hair a shade darker than his son's, and kind blue eyes that crinkled at the corners. His faded t-shirt had seen better days, and his jeans bore the worn look of regular use rather than the designer distressed variety that filled her ex-husband's closet. "Can I help you?" he asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'm sorry to bother you," Fiona said. "I was watching you teach your son to ride, and, well, I've been trying to get my son interested in learning, but he's resistant. You seem to have a good approach." The man glanced at the boy beside him, who was now focused entirely on preventing his ice cream from dripping onto his shoes. "This is Lucas," he said with a smile, "and I'm Ethan Evans." "Fiona Ellison," she replied, extending her hand, "and that's my son Oliver over there." Ethan's handshake was firm but gentle. "Nice to meet you, Fiona. Learning to ride can be tricky. How old is Oliver?" 9. And increasingly convinced that anything not involving a screen is beneath his dignity. Ethan laughed, a warm sound that made Fiona smile. Been there. Lucas went through a phase where he thought bicycles were baby stuff last year. Lucas looked up from his ice cream. That's before Dad showed me the cool jumps at the skate park, which you're absolutely not attempting until you're much older, Ethan added quickly, earning an eye roll from his son that was so perfectly adolescent that Fiona couldn't help but laugh. Would you consider giving Oliver a lesson? She asked impulsively. I'd compensate you for your time, of course. Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a subtle withdrawal. I'm not really a professional instructor or anything. I can see that, Fiona said, realizing her mistake. I didn't mean to imply. I just thought maybe since you were so patient with Lucas. Ethan glanced at his watch. Actually, we need to get going. I have a shift starting soon and Lucas has to get to his grandmother's, of course. Fiona felt a stab of disappointment. Sorry to have bothered you. As she turned to go, Lucas spoke up. Dad, maybe we could help. Oliver could use my bike to practice. It's a little small for him, but not too bad. Fiona watched as Ethan hesitated, clearly torn between whatever responsibilities awaited him and his son's eager suggestion. When do you need to be at work? She asked. 6. I pick up evening shifts at the hardware store 3 nights a week. Fiona glanced at her watch. It was just past 4. What if we meet here tomorrow afternoon, if you're free, I mean? Oliver gets out of his coding camp at 2 and we usually come to the park after. Ethan considered this for a moment. Lucas and I could probably swing by around 3. I don't work tomorrow. Great, Fiona said, perhaps too enthusiastically. She fumbled in her purse for a business card, but stopped herself. Something told her that handing Ethan Evans a card identifying her as CEO of Ellison Tech might change the easy dynamic between them. I'll give you my number instead. After they exchanged numbers, Fiona walked back to Oliver, who had barely registered her absence. As she sat down beside him, she looked back to see Ethan helping Lucas into the passenger seat of the truck, carefully buckling his seatbelt before closing the door. Who was that? Oliver asked without looking up. Someone who's going to teach you to ride a bike tomorrow, Fiona replied. This got his attention. Mom, I told you I don't want to learn. Just one lesson, Ollie. If you hate it, I won't bring it up again. Oliver scowled but didn't argue further, which Fiona counted as a small victory. As the old pickup truck pulled away from the curb, she found herself oddly excited about tomorrow. The following afternoon, Fiona arrived at the park with a reluctant Oliver in tow, only to find Ethan and Lucas already there, tossing a frisbee back and forth. She noticed that Ethan had brought not one but 2 bicycles, Lucas's smaller one, and what appeared to be an adult-sized bike that had seen better days. You're early, she called as they approached. Ethan caught the frisbee and turned to greet them. Lucas was too excited to wait. He's been talking about meeting Oliver since yesterday. Lucas ran up to Oliver, seemingly oblivious to the older boy's standoffish posture. Hi, I'm Lucas. I'm 7. Do you like frisbee, or we could play catch instead? I brought my baseball too. Oliver glanced at his mother, who gave him an encouraging nod. I'm Oliver, he said reluctantly. I don't really play sports much. That's okay, Lucas said cheerfully. What do you like to do? I code, and I'm creating my own game. Lucas's eyes widened. You make games? That's so cool. Can I see? To Fiona's surprise, Oliver actually pulled out his tablet and began showing Lucas his project. As the boys sat down on a nearby bench, Ethan walked over to her. I brought my old bike for you, he said. Figured if Oliver's learning, you might want to join in. Fiona blinked. Me. Oh, I know how to ride. When's the last time you did? She thought about it. Probably college, maybe earlier. Ethan's eyes twinkled. So about a decade ago. Are you trying to guess my age, Mr. Evans? Fiona asked, raising an eyebrow. Wouldn't dream of it, he replied with a grin. But biking's like swimming, you never really forget, but it helps to refresh your skills now and then. Fiona looked at the old blue bicycle skeptically. Is it safe? I fixed it up myself. New brakes, tuned the gears. It's not pretty, but it's solid. He patted the handlebars affectionately. This was my commuter for 3 years before I got the truck. Something about the way he'd prepared for this, bringing an extra bike, taking time to make sure it was safe, touched Fiona deeply. All right, she said. But if I fall and break something expensive, I'm holding you responsible. Deal. He called over to the boys. "Hey, who's ready to learn some biking skills?" To Fiona's amazement, Oliver actually put down his tablet and walked over, Lucas bouncing alongside him. The next hour passed in a blur of instruction, encouragement, and more than a few falls. Ethan was patient but firm, never allowing Oliver to give up even when frustration clearly set in. "You've got this," he kept saying. "Your balance is actually really good. You're overthinking it." Oliver, used to mastering new skills quickly, struggled with the physical coordination required. After his fifth fall, he threw down the helmet Ethan had insisted he wear. "This is stupid. I can't do it." Fiona started to intervene, but Ethan caught her eye and shook his head slightly. He crouched beside Oliver instead. "You know what's happening right now?" he asked calmly. "What?" Oliver snapped. "Your brain is building new pathways, like coding but for your body. The first few tries are always messy, just like when you're debugging a program, right?" Oliver looked surprised at the comparison. "How do you know about debugging?" "I took some computer science courses in college before dropping out," Ethan said. "Not enough to build games like you, but enough to understand the concept of iteration. Each time you try, you're getting data, making adjustments. That's all this is." Fiona watched in amazement as her son picked up the helmet, put it back on, and returned to the bicycle without further complaint. "You're good with him," she said quietly when Ethan stepped back. "Kids are usually pretty straightforward," Ethan replied. "They just want to be seen and heard." "And what about you?" she asked. "What do you want?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment he really looked at her, and Fiona felt a flutter of something unfamiliar. "These days," he finally said, "just to make sure Lucas has what he needs. Everything else is a bonus." Before she could respond, a shout from Oliver drew their attention. He had managed to pedal several feet on his own before stopping. "I did it," he exclaimed, his face lighting up with a genuine smile that Fiona hadn't seen in months. "You sure did," Ethan said, high-fiving the boy. Ready to try again with a running start, as Oliver eagerly repositioned himself, Lucas sidled up to Fiona. "My dad's really good at teaching stuff," he said proudly. "He taught me how to fish and change a tire and make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs." "That's quite a skill set," Fiona replied, charmed by the boy's obvious adoration for his father. "Yeah, he says it's important to know how to do lots of different things 'cause you never know what life will throw at you." Lucas tilted his head. "Do you know how to make dinosaur pancakes?" "I'm afraid not. I'm not much of a cook." Lucas looked scandalized. "But what do you eat for breakfast?" "Usually just coffee," Fiona admitted, realizing how lacking that sounded when described to a 7-year-old. "Dad says breakfast is the most important meal," Lucas informed her solemnly. "He gets up extra early to make mine, even when he worked night shift at the factory before it closed." This casual mention of Ethan's work situation gave Fiona pause. Between the patched-up bicycle, the ancient truck, and now this reference to a factory closure, it was becoming clear that Ethan's financial situation was precarious. Yet there was no bitterness in Lucas's tone, only matter-of-fact acceptance and obvious love for his father. By the time they finished the impromptu lesson, Oliver had progressed to riding in wobbly circles around the basketball court, his earlier resistance completely forgotten. "Same time next week?" Lucas asked hopefully as they packed up. Fiona looked to Ethan, who seemed hesitant. "We wouldn't want to impose on your father's schedule," she said carefully. "Actually," Ethan said, "I was thinking maybe this weekend might work better. The boys could practice longer without having to worry about school the next day. If you're free, that is." "We're free," Oliver piped up before Fiona could respond. "Right, Mom? You said you were going to try to take the weekend off for once." Fiona felt a moment of guilt. She had indeed promised Oliver a work-free weekend, though she'd already been planning to squeeze in a few hours of emails and calls while he was occupied with his devices. "We're free," she confirmed, smiling at Ethan. "Saturday morning." "Saturday's perfect," Ethan replied. "Lucas has karate at 4, but we're open until then." As they parted ways, Fiona found herself watching the battered pickup truck until it disappeared from view. For the first time in longer than she cared to admit, she was genuinely looking forward to the weekend. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, sunny, but not too hot. with a gentle breeze that ruffled the park's maple trees. Fiona had surprised herself by actually turning off her work phone for the day, something that had earned her a suspicious look from her assistant when she'd announced her intentions on Friday afternoon. She had just finished spreading a blanket on the grass when she spotted Ethan's truck pulling into the parking lot. This time, in addition to the 2 bicycles strapped in the bed, she noticed he was unloading what appeared to be a small cooler and a canvas bag. "Hope you don't mind," he said as he approached, Lucas helping him carry the items. "I thought we might make a day of it. I packed some lunch, nothing fancy, just sandwiches and stuff." "That was thoughtful," Fiona replied, touched by the gesture. "We brought some snacks too." Oliver, who had been hovering near the bikes, actually looked pleased. "Did you bring those cookies from last time?" he asked Lucas. "Yep, Dad made them fresh last night." Ethan looked slightly embarrassed. "Just basic chocolate chip cookies," Lucas insisted. The morning passed pleasantly, with both boys making progress on their cycling skills. Oliver had moved from wobbly circles to confident straight lines, while Lucas was working on more advanced techniques with Ethan's guidance. Fiona, true to her word, had taken a few spins on Ethan's old bike, surprised by how enjoyable it felt to do something so simple and physical after years behind a desk. Around noon, they gathered on the blanket for lunch. Ethan's, nothing fancy, turned out to be surprisingly delicious turkey sandwiches with avocado on homemade bread, sliced fruit, and the promised cookies that both boys immediately reached for. "Maybe food first, dessert second," Ethan suggested, gently redirecting Lucas's hand toward the sandwiches. Fiona did the same with Oliver, who surprisingly complied without argument. She couldn't help but notice how different this was from their usual weekend lunches, which typically involved expensive takeout eaten in front of separate screens. "So, Fiona," Ethan said as they ate, "what do you do when you're not teaching your son to ride a bike?" The question was innocent enough, but Fiona hesitated. In her experience, revealing her position as CEO of a major tech company tended to change the dynamic of any conversation. People either became intimidated or immediately saw dollar signs. "I work in the tech industry," she said vaguely. "Software development mainly." "That explains Oliver's coding talents," Ethan nodded. "Must be interesting work." "It can be," she agreed. "Though lately it seems to involve more meetings than actual innovation. What about you? Lucas mentioned you worked at a factory before." A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "Yeah, Westside Manufacturing. I was a floor supervisor until they moved operations overseas last year. Been piecing together work since then, the hardware store, some construction gigs when they're available. Hoping to start classes at the community college in the fall, get my degree finished finally." "What would you study?" Fiona asked, genuinely curious. "Engineering, probably." "I was 3 semesters in when," he glanced at Lucas, who was now showing Oliver something on the grass a few feet away, "when life took a different turn." The careful phrasing told Fiona volumes. She'd wondered about Lucas's mother but hadn't wanted to pry. "It takes courage to go back to school," she said, "especially while raising a child." Ethan shrugged, but she could see her words had meant something to him. "Just trying to set a good example, show Lucas that it's never too late to work toward what you want." "And what do you want, Ethan Evans?" Fiona asked, echoing her question from their previous meeting. This time he held her gaze a moment longer. "Stability. A career I can be proud of, maybe eventually." He trailed off, looking away. "Eventually," she prompted gently. "Someone to share it all with," he admitted, then quickly added, "but that's way down the priority list. Lucas comes first, always." The conviction in his voice made Fiona's heart beat a little faster. How different he was from her ex-husband, who had viewed their son as more of an accessory to their perfect corporate image than a priority. After lunch, while the boys resumed their cycling practice, Fiona and Ethan walked alongside them, falling into easy conversation. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ethan said after a while. "That depends on the question," she replied, smiling to soften her words. "Fair enough." He seemed to consider his next words carefully. "You don't strike me as someone who has much free time, yet here you are spending a whole Saturday at the park. Is this a new development, or am I misreading you completely?" Fiona laughed softly. Your read is accurate. This is unusual for me. Typically, my weekends involve catching up on work I couldn't fit into the week. And what changed? You did, she said simply. When his eyebrows shot up in surprise, she continued. Seeing you with Lucas that first day, how present you were with him despite whatever struggles you might be facing, it made me realize what Oliver's been missing. What I've been missing too, honestly. Ethan was quiet for a moment. I'm not some perfect dad, you know, I mess up plenty. But after Rachel left, I promised myself Lucas would never doubt that he was the most important thing in my world. Rachel is his mother, Fiona asked carefully. Was, Ethan corrected. She signed away her parental rights when Lucas was 4. Decided motherhood wasn't her thing after all. His tone was matter of fact, without bitterness. It was hard at first, but looking back, it was better for Lucas to have a clean break than years of half-hearted visits. I'm sorry, Fiona said. That must have been difficult for both of you. We managed. His smile returned as he watched Lucas successfully navigate a tight turn. He's a resilient kid. What about Oliver's father? Is he in the picture, technically? Cameron pays his child support on time and takes Oliver for the mandated weekends, which they usually spend at various country clubs or expensive restaurants. Quality time isn't really his specialty. His loss, Ethan said, watching as Oliver cautiously attempted a small incline. That's a great kid you've got there. The genuine warmth in his voice touched Fiona deeply. How long had it been since someone had seen her son as more than an extension of her success or a pawn in corporate networking? As the afternoon progressed, Fiona found herself reluctant for it to end. When Lucas finally reminded his father about his karate lesson, she felt a surprising disappointment. We should do this again, she said as they packed up their things. Oliver really enjoys spending time with Lucas. And with you, Oliver added unexpectedly, looking at Ethan. You explain things better than those instructors Mom hired before. Ethan seemed pleased by the compliment. Anytime, buddy. Maybe next weekend we could try the bike trail by the river. It's pretty flat and great for beginners. Can we, Mom? Oliver asked eagerly. Of course, Fiona replied, trying to keep the too eager tone out of her own voice. I'll make sure to keep my schedule clear. As they walked to their respective vehicles, Lucas suddenly stopped. Wait, I forgot to give you this. He ran back to the truck and returned with a small plastic container which he handed to Fiona. Extra cookies for later. Dad always makes too many. That's very thoughtful, Lucas, thank you. She accepted the container, touched by the simple gesture. Ethan looked slightly embarrassed. He insisted, said Oliver might get hungry before you got home. They'll be appreciated, she assured him. Oliver usually raids the pantry the minute we walk in the door, regardless of how much he's just eaten. Growing boys, Ethan nodded knowingly. Lucas is the same way. I swear half my paycheck goes to keeping the fridge stocked. As they said their goodbyes, Fiona impulsively touched Ethan's arm. Thank you for today. It meant a lot to both of us. His eyes met hers, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them. It was my pleasure. Really. Over the next few weeks, their weekend bicycle outings became a regular event. Each time, Ethan would bring some homemade lunch or snack, always downplaying his culinary skills despite the evidence to the contrary. Fiona found herself looking forward to Saturdays with an anticipation that bordered on giddiness, something she hadn't experienced since her college days. During their 4th outing, as they watched the boys race down a gentle slope at the river trail, Ethan turned to her with an unexpected question. Would you and Oliver like to come over for dinner next Friday? Lucas has been asking, and I thought, well, if you're not too busy with work. We'd love to, Fiona replied, perhaps too quickly. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly feeling like a teenager being asked to a dance. Can we bring anything? Just yourselves, he said with a smile that made her heart skip. On Friday evening, Fiona found herself standing outside a modest 2-bedroom bungalow in a working-class neighborhood across town, holding a bottle of wine she'd spent too much time selecting, and a bouquet of flowers that Oliver had insisted they bring for Lucas. Is this the right place? Oliver asked, looking skeptically at the small house with its neatly mowed but slightly patchy lawn. Yes, Fiona said firmly, And remember what we talked about were guests in their home. Oliver nodded solemnly. At Fiona's insistence, they'd had a conversation earlier about economic differences and the importance of gratitude and respect. To her relief, Oliver had seemed to understand, even expressing excitement about seeing Lucas's room. Ethan opened the door, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that looked newer than his usual attire. The delicious smell of something baking wafted out behind him. "Right on time," he said, stepping back to let them in. "Lucas has been watching the clock for the last hour." The house was small but impeccably clean, with furniture that had clearly seen better days but was well maintained. What struck Fiona immediately were the personal touches framed artwork that was obviously Lucas's handiwork, family photos on every surface, a bookshelf overflowing with well-read paperbacks and children's books. Lucas came barreling out of what must have been his bedroom. "Oliver. Want to see my room? I cleaned it all up special, and Dad said I could show you my Lego collection." The boys disappeared down the hallway, leaving Ethan and Fiona standing somewhat awkwardly in the living room. "I brought wine," Fiona said, handing him the bottle. "And the flowers are from Oliver for Lucas." "That's really thoughtful," Ethan said, accepting both. "I hope you like lasagna. It's Lucas's favorite, and he specifically requested it for tonight." "I love lasagna," Fiona assured him, following him into the small kitchen where a dish sat cooling on the counter. "It smells amazing. My grandmother's recipe," Ethan explained, opening a drawer to look for a corkscrew. "One of the few useful things I inherited from my family." As he opened the wine, Fiona glanced around the kitchen. Like the rest of the house, it was modest but clean, with obviously aged appliances that had been well maintained. "Can I help with anything?" she offered. "Everything's pretty much ready," Ethan said. "But you could keep me company while I finish the salad." As they stood side by side at the counter, Fiona washing lettuce while Ethan chopped vegetables, she was struck by how comfortable it felt. There was none of the awkwardness she usually experienced in social situations outside of work, where she was perpetually on guard against those who might want something from her. "So," Ethan said casually, "I've been meaning to ask, what exactly do you do in the tech industry?" "You've been pretty vague about it." Fiona hesitated, her hands stilling in the water. "I'm in management, actually. Like a team leader or department head," he asked. "More like company leadership." She turned to face him. "I'm the CEO, actually, of Ellison Tech." Ethan's knife paused mid-chop. "Ellison Tech. As in the Ellison Tech that just acquired Micro Vision Systems for what, $3 billion? Fiona nodded, watching his face carefully. Ethan whistled softly. "Wow, that's not what I was expecting. Does it change things?" she asked quietly. "Between us, I mean." He seemed to consider this for a moment. "Only in that I now feel slightly ridiculous for inviting you over for homemade lasagna when you could probably eat at 5-star restaurants every night." "I prefer lasagna," she said honestly, "especially homemade. And for what it's worth, I've been dreading telling you. In my experience, once people know, they start seeing the company instead of the person." Ethan set down his knife and turned to face her fully. "Fiona, I've spent the last month getting to know you as the woman who cares deeply about her son, laughs at my terrible jokes, and gets adorably competitive during our bike races. Finding out you're also a hugely successful CEO doesn't change any of that." Relief washed over her. "Thank you for that," he smiled, then a thought seemed to strike him. "Wait, if you're the CEO of Ellison Tech, why didn't you just hire some professional bike instructor for Oliver? Why ask me that day in the park?" "Because I watched you with Lucas," she replied simply. "And I saw something money can't buy: genuine patience and love. That's what Oliver needed, not another paid professional pretending to care because his mother's check would clear." Ethan's eyes softened, and he took a step closer to her. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you asked." "So am I," she said quietly, the moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Ethan moved closer still, and Fiona found herself leaning toward him. "Dad, Oliver says he's starving." Lucas's voice broke the spell as he and Oliver thundered into the kitchen. "Can we eat now?" Ethan stepped back, clearing his throat. "Perfect timing, buddy. Dinner's ready." The meal was lively, filled with the boys' excited chatter about everything from video games to Lucas's karate achievements. Fiona couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed so much or felt so present in a moment. Across the table, Ethan caught her eye occasionally, his smile holding a warmth that made her cheeks flush. After dinner, while the boys returned to Lucas's room to continue building whatever Lego masterpiece they'd started, Ethan and Fiona settled on the small back porch with their wine. "This is nice," Fiona said, looking up at the stars becoming visible in the darkening sky. "Peaceful. It's my favorite spot in the house," Ethan admitted. "After Lucas goes to bed, I sometimes sit out here and just think." "What do you think about?" she asked. He looked at her, his expression open and honest. "Lately, the simple admission made her heart race. "Ethan, I know this is probably crazy," he continued. "We're from completely different worlds. You run a multi-billion-dollar company, and I'm piecing together jobs to make rent. But these past few weeks have been the best I've had in years," Fiona finished for him. "And yes, our situations are different, but that's not what matters to me. What matters is how you treat your son, how you've helped mine, how you make me feel when I'm with you. And how is that?" He asked quietly, like a person, not a position, like Fiona, not the CEO. She met his gaze. "Like someone worth knowing for who I am, not what I have." Ethan reached across the space between their chairs, taking her hand in his. "Because that is who you are to me, just Fiona. The woman who loves her son fiercely, works too hard, and has the most beautiful laugh I've ever heard." Fiona felt tears prick at her eyes. "I'd like to see where this could go, Ethan, if you would too." His answer was to lean forward, closing the distance between them as his lips met hers in a gentle kiss that held the promise of more to come. From inside the house, unnoticed by the adults, two young boys peered through the window. "See," Lucas whispered triumphantly. "I told you my plan would work." "Your plan," Oliver scoffed quietly. "It was my idea to ask for more bike lessons." "Yeah, but I'm the one who suggested dinner. And I'm the one who told my mom she should date your dad because he makes her smile." The boys grinned at each other, a new bond forming between them as they watched their parents, both lost in a moment that felt like the beginning of something wonderful. 6 months later, Ethan stood in his garage, carefully adjusting the brakes on a new bicycle, a Christmas gift for Lucas. Behind him, the door opened and Fiona stepped in, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "How's it coming?" she asked, setting one mug on the workbench. "Almost done," Ethan replied, straightening up to accept both the mug and the kiss she offered. "He's going to flip when he sees it." "Both boys are," Fiona said, leaning against him as he wrapped an arm around her waist. "Oliver's been dropping hints for weeks about wanting a new mountain bike." "Little does he know," Ethan chuckled, nodding toward the covered shape in the corner that was Oliver's own Christmas surprise. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of adjustment and joy. Ethan had started his engineering courses, excelling beyond even his own expectations. Fiona had restructured her work schedule to make family time a priority, even delegating enough responsibilities to take her first real vacation in years, a 2-week trip to the coast where the 4 of them had built sand castles, flown kites, and grown even closer as a newly formed family unit. "Did you finish wrapping your gift for Lucas?" Ethan asked. Fiona nodded. "The coding set is all ready to go. I still can't believe how excited he is about learning." "He wants to be like his big brother," Ethan said softly. "Oliver's been so patient teaching him the basics." The relationship between the boys had flourished alongside the adults, with Oliver taking his role as unofficial older brother seriously, while Lucas provided the uncomplicated friendship and admiration that Oliver had never experienced from his peers. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Fiona asked, referring to the Christmas dinner where Ethan would finally meet her parents. "Terrified," he admitted with a small smile, "but ready." The journey hadn't been without challenges. There had been raised eyebrows from Fiona's corporate colleagues, skeptical questions from her family, and the occasional awkward moment when their different financial realities became apparent. But through it all, they'd maintained the connection that had sparked that first day in the park, a genuine appreciation for the person behind the circumstances. "They're going to love you," she assured him, resting her head against his shoulder. "How could they not?" I hope so, he said, kissing the top of her head. Because I plan to ask their permission for something important. Fiona pulled back slightly to look at him. Ethan Evans, are you planning what I think you're planning? He smiled, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small velvet box. I was going to wait until Christmas morning, but maybe now is better. Opening the box revealed a ring that was modest in size but exquisite in design, a simple solitaire diamond set in white gold. It's not the biggest, he began, but Fiona pressed a finger to his lips. It's perfect, she said, her eyes shining with tears. Absolutely perfect. Fiona Ellison, Ethan said, taking her hand. I never expected that teaching a little boy to ride a bike would lead me to the love of my life. But here we are, and I can't imagine being anywhere else. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you and Oliver how much you mean to me? Yes, she whispered, as he slipped the ring onto her finger. 1,000 times yes. Their lips met in a kiss filled with promise, both knowing that the most valuable things they had found in each other had nothing to do with bank accounts or job titles, but everything to do with the love they had built, one bicycle lesson at a time.